So today, I'm once again walking in the footsteps of the great writer W.G. Sebald, and we're going to follow the walks that he did in this book, Austerlitz. So not all of the walks, of course. It's the walk that he did from Liverpool Street Station here down to Alderney Street in Mile End, or Alderney Road in reality. It's Alderney Street in the book. And I'm doing this walk today with the brilliant artist Bob and Roberta Smith over there, who's currently looking for the bar at the Great Eastern Hotel. And as Sebald mentions in the book, the hotel here, the Great Eastern Hotel, and part of Liverpool Street Station, was the site of the first Bethlehem Hospital, 1247 to 1676, later better known as Bedlam. So we went looking for some of the locations mentioned in the book inside Liverpool Street Station.
The central character in Sebald's novel, Jacques Austerlitz, is sent to England in 1939 when he is 5 years old on a Kindertransport. The Kindertransport was a programme to rescue Jewish children from Nazi-occupied areas of Europe. Austerlitz is fostered by a couple in Wales, his name changed and past forgotten. Since my childhood and youth, I have never really known who I was, he tells the narrator of the book in the bar of the Great Eastern Hotel at Liverpool Street Station, where the 5-year-old Austerlitz had arrived in England. The station plays a key role in triggering Austerlitz's search for his past. Bob thought that W.H. Smith's stood on the site of the old station waiting room that's mentioned in the book, so we went inside to see if we could find any traces of its former life.
Oh yeah, look at that down the end.
And there, lurking amongst the chocolate bars, paperbacks and magazines, were the remnants of the great age of railway travel. The security guard told us that this actually used to be the reception of the Grand Great Eastern Hotel. Bob then realised that the old station waiting room that he had visited in the past was now a branch of Starbucks. Whether this is the waiting room that plays a significant role in the book Austerlitz is another question. In any case, it's really magical to find these vestiges of the station's past hidden in plain sight amongst the everyday.
So the Great Eastern Hotel, Bob, plays a big role in this story, the story of Austerlitz, doesn't it? Because that's where our narrator, Sebald, that's where he meets his friend Jacques Austerlitz. Once again, comes in on the train, Sebald comes in on the train from Norwich, and he's in the bar at the Great Eastern Hotel, which is over there, behind us. And he rekindles his friendship with Jacques Austerlitz, and they talk all night in the bar at the Great Eastern Hotel. And then the next day they go walking through the East End to where Austerlitz lives in Alderney Street, Alderney Road in reality. And that's the walk we're doing today. So we've just come off Bishopsgate and we're going down here towards Commercial Street, towards Toynbee Studios. And the route we're following today was given to us by the great writer Ian Sinclair, who did this walk with a poet called Stephen Watts. And it was Stephen Watts who used to meet W.G. Sebald at Liverpool Street Station and take him on these walks through the East End. So this is going back to the roots. Going back to the roots of Austerlitz, Bob.
It's also my route to work.
You went Bob's route to work.
So I get out of the station at Liverpool Street and I walk down Raven Row. And I do this because it's a very beautiful street and it's a cut through. But this route is really, I guess 17th, 18th century London.
So this is Raven Row Gallery. This is one of the big homeless shelters, Bob was saying. A Victorian institution, and still is a homeless shelter. So we're going to carry on across from Artillery Row, straight down towards Commercial Street. And actually in the book, there's not much of it, you get a couple of locations, but you don't know the actual streets the way they went. So we're piecing it together from the route that Ian Sinclair did with Stephen Watts. We'll avoid this truck. And we have Hawksmoor's magnificent church here in Commercial Street.
And you can see beside the Hawksmoor Church, you can just see where the Market Cafe was, the original Market Cafe, where Gilbert and George religiously went and had really horrible eggs and beans and chips. They loved that cafe. And that's the Fournier Street.
This is the image in the book Austerlitz. This is the rucksack, as described. This is Jacques Austerlitz's rucksack, which is actually belongs to the poet Stephen Watts, who had a studio here somewhere. And this is where that photograph was taken. The famous Toynbee Studios. Famous, of course, because this is where Gandhi did a famous speech.
Did he? Gandhi was here.
Mahatma Gandhi did a speech at Toynbee, which became quite famous. There's newsreel footage of it. Thousands of people turned out, and this is where he was asked the question. This is so the story goes. He was asked the question, Mr. Gandhi, what do you think of British civilization? And he said, I think it would be a very good idea. So we're going to go back up Commercial Street and just turn right into Wentworth Street. Wentworth Street is a real slice of the old East End. When I studied at City Poly, we'd come down here at lunchtime to get a sandwich, get a bagel, get a curry. So here we have the famous Brick Lane. We're going to go straight across. Obviously tempted to go up there and get a bagel. And over here you'll see a Buxton's pub. The Buxtons were part of the family that owned the Truman Brewery, and some of them lived in Leytonstone and helped preserve Epping Forest for the people of London. So the significance of Greater X Street, and we're looking for Greater X House, is it's where the Yiddish poet Stenzel lived, and he came to Britain from Germany in 1936, and he lived in Greater X House down here.
The Yiddish poet Stenzel, he's a poet who got out to London from Berlin at the time of the Berlin Olympics. He was smuggled out in a coffin by an athlete who realized that if he stuck around in Germany he was pretty much doomed, because he was not exactly a favorite of the regime, and he was obviously very Jewish. So he moved to Whitechapel and lived in this kind of exile, in which he held on to the kind of memories of knowing people within the Kafka circle, and representing a kind of oral poetry tradition, and stalking the streets of London as if it was somewhere in Poland or Czechoslovakia or Germany.
This is the only building on the street which would date for the. If he came here in 1930s, this would be the only building that would be here still.
So these flats would have been pretty much brand new when he moved here in 36.
Yeah.
Bob's just pointed out actually that Stenzel isn't mentioned in Austerlitz. So I think the assumption we'll make is that really these walks that Seybold did in the area was when he was sort of researching the Jewish East End, because it's about Jacques Austerlitz uncovering and unearthing his Jewish identity, which he didn't know he had.
Yeah, it's fascinating. But we're really finding out a lot about Seybold here, aren't we?
Yeah.
Much more than we can find out about somebody who didn't exist, But we're finding out about his interest, somehow.
Yeah.
Because he also, from reading the book, he must have gone to Theresienstadt in Czechoslovakia and unearthed that. So this idea of this German guy whose father was in the Wehrmacht trying to reconcile, actually, what it means to be German somehow from that era It's fascinating, actually. It's kind of bizarre.
So our next stop, we're Greatorex Street here by my thumb, and our next stop is Brady Street Jewish Cemetery, which is over there, just below the word Bethnal Green. So it will probably be locked up. I don't think it's just open, but we're going to go over there anyway. This is one of the sites that Seybold walked to when he was researching Austerlitz. So we're just going down Old Montague Street, but towards Brady Street. These places here, Bob, I imagine would have been built on bomb sites.
Yeah, it will be flattened.
Yeah. This is a really interesting 60s housing development. So we're just going to briefly go across Valence Road, famous for its association with the Kray twins. That's Valence Road Gardens over there.
And this park, for him, the quiet of this park as it was very, very significant. And there was a bench over there that he used to sit on and look at these trees and think of it as his own holy Jerusalem in exile. And I think the traces of that, been here for years and years and years, but with the current developments, they're beginning to disappear. And the Jewish burial ground, which is just beyond, is almost out of reach now, and as a memory site, because we've got the final mega dig of the Crossrail project, which is a monster mastodon that underwrites all of the other previous developments, and is a blockage in London's psychic currents of the most extreme kind.
And now we're going to go along Durwood Street towards Brady Street Cemetery. This part of the route, we are just making it up really. We're just joining together the locations from a list that I was given by Ian Sinclair. And that's mentioned in his book, The Last London. And here we have a bit of the Crossrail development at Whitechapel Station. This is a development which never seems to end. We're having to detour around along Whitechapel High Street, which I believe is mentioned in Austerlitz in the book.
I used to come down here. I had a studio on Reaver's Field. I used to come down here and buy jackfruits and really interesting South Asian vegetables, and then cast them and make rubber versions of them and exhibit them in galleries. It's a good period of Bob and Bert Swift work.
Here we have the London Hospital, or the old London Hospital, I should say.
The old London Hospital.
So we're refreshed. I had some samosas back there. Bob's got some tea and some Indian sweets, and which is good because we're at Brady Street now. So we're going to turn into Brady Street, and we're going to try and find the Jewish burial ground, which is up here somewhere. This looks like a kind of temporary cement works as part of the Crossrail building at Whitechapel. Bob, the East End was sort of famous for its association with artists. You were sort of talking about the old the art car boot fair that was here and the studios that were in the area. You had a studio not far away. Is there?
I had lots of old workshop buildings and studios. In fact, I had a studio on Reaver's Field, which is just up here. And I think there probably are still quite a lot of artists here, but there'll all be people who bought their places, and people who are my generation. There won't be younger artists working in studios because it's just far too expensive. The idea now is that people, Space and all these kind of organisations are all moving out to Barking and Dagenham and Ilford, even Ilford. Space Studios now is based at Ilford. So So I think less and less is the answer.
This block of flats here is called Mocatta House, and I think that's a character in one of Ian Sinclair's books. Dining on Stones, there's a character called Mocatta, I'm pretty sure. I'll check. So we were just chatting away and we noticed the wall here, and this is most likely the Jewish burial ground.
Yeah, I think this is it.
It's often closed, that's the thing, so we'll see if we can find an entrance.
Yeah, but there isn't.
So the gates are locked.
But
You can see through.
we're on Brady Street, and this is the cemetery, the Jewish cemetery. And I'm excited about this because the CAS, where I work, we have the Brady Social Club Archive, which is an archive of wonderful photographs of children playing in various different day trips that the Jewish Association set up for children. I don't know if they were displaced, whether they were little Austerlitzes or whether they were just kids who grew up in the East End from families in the East End. But
So we're just going to go back down Brady Street to Mile End Road as per Ian Sinclair's instructions. Here we have the old almshouses on Mile End Road, dating from 1695 or 1698? I think it's 1695, isn't it? There's the statue of William Booth over there, who created his famous maps of the London poor, these colour-coded maps of the poor districts of London, and wrote about them. Quite a famous document. And we're now passing into Stepney. Row of beautiful old, what I assume are Georgian houses here that have been restored. So just by Stepney Green Station, we're going to swing a left into Globe Road, then quickly into Alderney Street, which is where Jacques Austerlitz in the book Austerlitz lives. So this is a big moment now. We're just up Globe Road here. We've got the pub, the Horn of Plenty, and then down there is Alderney Road. In the book it's called Alderney Street, but Alderney Road is where Jacques Austerlitz lives. And this is where Sebald would come walking, and where the Sebald in the book would come to walk to visit Jacques Austerlitz.
obviously Austerlitz doesn't exist, because this is an idea, but why did Sebald choose this street? It's a very nice street to live in.
Yeah.
But I can't, that's quite interesting, isn't it? It's quite a long way from Liverpool Street Station, not close to where his poetic pals lived, really.
Well,
So it's quite interesting to
I
think
think it is consistent with the kind of place where architectural historians would have lived in the 70s and 80s when these properties were quite cheap. And I think the character explains, because Sebald notes, how did you afford such a expensive house? Because we bought it very cheap, I think in the 80s or in the 70s, when they were cheaper. Now we have no idea where Jacques Austerlitz, the character, lived in this street, but we do know that actually there is another Jewish burial ground here, which I don't think is marked, but I can see it up ahead. There's a long wall with a door in it, and I think it's one of the oldest Jewish burial grounds in London. This beautiful big square here. So you reckon you can understand now why he chose this as a location?
Well, yeah, I can understand. It's a beautiful, unique part of London, really, isn't it? This very still and quiet place.
Austerlitz suffers from a breakdown, possibly caused by his discovery about his past and looking into his past, and he is then he spends time in a psychiatric hospital, St Clement's Hospital, and then they go for a walk around Tower Hamlets Cemetery, which is one of the magnificent 7 Victorian cemeteries. So hopefully
Will we get in?
We'll get
Will
in.
we get in?
It's coming up to sunset.
It's the big jeopardy.
The Big Jeopardy. So that's the end. It's not far away. Wow, look at that. It's a beautiful building there. Yeah, Tower Hamlets Local History Library. What a beautiful building. Now just back along the Mile End Road for a short distance before we cross over and go to Tower Hamlets Cemetery and St Clement's Hospital.
Yes.
As we push east, Saybold used to take a lot of walks from the East End and would walk all night, and he'd sometimes walk out east down the Mile End Road and keep going.
And
To go out.
Austerlitz does that, doesn't he? Austerlitz.
Is it Austerlitz or is it still the Saybold character? One of them does it.
Yeah, it's walking all night.
He walks all night and he goes out, and in reality it was Saybold, and he would walk out to Chigwell and out to Romford, and then he would walk as far north as he could from here. So he would have walked down here, down the Mile End Road at night time. So we're turning off Mile End Road down Southern Grove. You can see the towers of Canary Wharf there rising ahead of us. So,
Yes.
Bob, you were saying that you found the tone of voice reminiscent of other
It's fascinating.
writers.
It's been a revelation for me this walk this afternoon, because one of the things that when I picked up Austerlitz that I really enjoyed was the stylistic tick or idea that it's all this kind of reported speech of Sebald telling us, or the first person narrator telling us about Austerlitz and what Austerlitz is up to. And I thought at the time, where have I heard this before? This is Patrick Keeler, Robinson in Space, and the idea of Robinson, and we're being told what Robinson is up to. And I thought, wow, they're in the same territory, this psychogeographic. Which one came first? And you've just told me it was Keeler.
So when I read,
It's not Sebald's invention at all.
When I read
that's really interesting. I think
Yeah.
that's fascinating.
well, when I read Austerlitz, I thought you're right. The tone of
They should
voice.
give they were going to give Sebald a Nobel Prize.
Give it to Patrick Keeler.
I think we should give it to Patrick Keeler. Pop round there.
Well,
We should tell
what's
the
interesting-
judges in Switzerland, whoever it is.
If you read The View from the Train, which is Keeler's book of writings, you see, which is a brilliant book, and there's one particular chapter where he studied architecture, right? So he was an architect, and he did a project where he travelled to Czechoslovakia, which is where Austerlitz is from originally, and he does this project where he goes around photographing and filming the architecture in Czechoslovakia for a project. And he has this
That's what
archive.
Sebald does, because Sebald
It's
goes
what
to...
Austerlitz does as well. So Austerlitz
Sebald.
has this archive of black and white photographs. Yeah. So the character, in a way, there's a lot of parallels between the Jack Austerlitz character and the architect Patrick Keeler.
God, we've gone for a
Yeah.
walk. I mean, this is fascinating, isn't it? Because we've gone to try and find Austerlitz. I thought we wouldn't find Austerlitz, because I think Austerlitz is a slightly unsubstantial character, really. Amazing idea. We found Sebald, and now we're finding Patrick Keeler. It's interesting.
It's Tower Hamlets Cemetery Park. This is where Sebald and Austerlitz, they come walking in, and they mention a particular tomb that we'll look for. So this is the book Austerlitz, and these are the photographs of Tower Hamlets Cemetery. And he writes here about we walked together a little way out of town along Mile End Road to the large Tower Hamlets Cemetery. That's the walk we've just done, and which is surrounded by a tall, dark brick wall and. Like the adjoining complex of St Clement's Hospital, according to a remark made by Austerlitz in passing, was one of the scenes in the phase of his story. So we need to find that. It's this one here. She's got one arm. So, well, what were you thinking?
Well, we were hunting for Austerlitz. Austerlitz is this Kindertransport child, and it makes me think about two people that I know. One, the artist Maurice Blick, wasn't Kindertransport, but he is an amazing artist. The first studio I moved into in London, in the East End, Maurice was making his sculptures of standing figures. And over the years, I got to know Maurice, and he was a child in Balsam. And then the other real Austerlitz character is that I knew quite well, got to know him a little bit, is the artist Gustav Metzger. And Gustav Metzger, I once had him in the back of my car, giving him a lift from one exhibition to the other. Gustav Metzger he did come here on the Kindertransport, and he actually lived in, he had antiques business at one stage, or selling, I'm not sure the nature of it really, but selling bric-a-brac up in East Anglia somewhere, and but his whole thing was auto-destruction, and famously he taught in the art school where the Who's guitarist was
Pete Townsend.
Pete Townsend supposedly, it might be a bit of a myth, learnt to smash up his guitar because Gustav Metzger was smashing things up. He was smashing things up because the Germans smashed up his life and his family and murdered them. So it makes me think, Austerlitz is I think he's a bit of an unsubstantial character, really. But the character of people who really went through that is anything but that, really substantial.
It's my first time in this cemetery, and this is one of the Magnificent Seven Victorian cemeteries. It's a really beautiful cemetery. Just here, overlooking the cemetery, is the old St Clement's Hospital, and this is where Austerlitz went after he had a breakdown, and he could look into the cemetery park. So that plays quite a big part in the story. So it says here, the building was built in 1849. Now, of course, it's luxury apartments, but once an asylum. So, Bob, that's the end of our Austerlitz trail.
It's been an amazing walk. It makes me want to find the roots of all sorts of other literary masterpieces.
What I like about it is you have a few points in a book, just a handful of locations which you fixate on, but of course then it leads you to lots of other places as well. So it's been a great...
Well, the authenticity of the ideas that we've ended up at that cemetery, which I've never been to before, having worked in the East End all my life.
And it's a great East End walk on its own. Even if you stripped away the book, it's a great East End walk to do from Liverpool Street down to Tower Hamlets Cemetery. Thanks for coming along with me, Bob, on this.
No,
I think this was actually your idea, I think.
Well, I think I was given the book. My wife gave me Austerlitz last year. I really loved it, actually. But it set various questions going. One of the questions for me, this is why doing this is so interesting, is to do with, I'm married to Jessie. Jessie's Jewish, my kids are Jewish, and my relationship to Jewry and London and all of that is interesting. I can see what Sebald was trying to do. I sort of don't think it was in his gift to do in the end.
So thank you for coming along on this walk with us through the East End on the trail of W.G. Sebald's Austerlitz. I look forward to seeing you on the next walk, wherever that may be, who knows. Bob probably won't be here, so say goodbye to Bob now. And I look forward to the next expedition.